Imagine you have $10 billion. Not 10 million, 10 billion. And you decide to buy something unusual, a nuclear power plant. At first, the business sounds almost unbeatable. Build a reactor, split atoms, turn heat into electricity, sell that electricity to millions of people, and keep doing it for decades. But there's a problem. You could spend billions of dollars, wait more than a decade, and still have absolutely nothing to sell. Because with nuclear power, the most dangerous financial moment can happen before the reactor even turns on. Every year of delay means workers still need to be paid. Loans keep accumulating interest, construction continues consuming money, and the date when your first dollar of electricity revenue arrives moves further away. But somehow, investors, utilities, and governments still build these things. Why? Because if you survive the construction, the economics completely change. So what does it really cost to own a nuclear power plant? And after spending billions just to switch it on, can you actually make money? Let's say the money isn't a problem. You find a site, you hire engineers, you choose a reactor design, and you're ready to start building. Except a nuclear power plant isn't a giant factory you can simply order. You're trying to build one of the most regulated pieces of infrastructure on Earth. Before electricity ever reaches the grid, an entire system has to exist around the reactor. Licensing, safety reviews, cooling systems, transmission infrastructure, emergency planning, security, fuel supply, specialized workers, government oversight, and thousands of components that have to work together. Even ownership itself may be more complicated than it appears. A nuclear plant doesn't necessarily belong to one company. Plant Vogtle in Georgia, for example, has multiple co-owners. So forget the image of one billionaire walking into a nuclear dealership and buying a reactor. In reality, ownership can involve utilities, partners, lenders, regulators, and governments. And they all care about one thing: risk. Because the moment construction begins, enormous amounts of money start moving in one direction, out, and for years, almost nothing comes back. Imagine construction begins tomorrow. Thousands of workers arrive, concrete is poured, steel rises, massive components are installed. Your reactor slowly takes shape, but there's something else growing alongside it. Your financial bill, because you may have borrowed billions to build this plant, and borrowed money has a price: interest. Now imagine your project is delayed by 1 year. Your reactor produces no commercial electricity during that extra year. But the financial machine doesn't stop. Workers still need paying. Construction continues. Capital remains tied up, and financing costs keep accumulating. Then another year passes, and another. This is why construction time can become one of the most important numbers in nuclear economics. The reactor doesn't just need to work, it needs to get finished. And this creates a strange situation. A cheaper reactor that takes much longer than expected could become financially painful, while an expensive project completed predictably may be easier to finance. This is also one reason governments often become deeply involved. Loan guarantees, regulated cost recovery, long-term electricity contracts, state-backed financing. Different countries use different systems, but underneath them is the same uncomfortable question: who takes the loss if this project goes wrong? Because nuclear history has an answer. Sometimes everyone spends the money, and the reactor never opens. At the VC Summer nuclear site, 2 new reactors were supposed to become part of America's nuclear future. Billions of dollars went into the project. Construction advanced. Structures appeared. Workers showed up. Money disappeared into concrete, steel, equipment, and labor. Then the project collapsed. Construction was abandoned. Think about the economics of that for a moment. A finished power plant can sell electricity. An unfinished power plant cannot. It doesn't matter how advanced the engineering is. It doesn't matter how much concrete has already been poured. It doesn't matter how many billions have already been spent. A half-built reactor produces exactly zero electricity. This is one of the nightmares of infrastructure investing: sunk capital without a completed revenue-producing asset. But around the same time, another American nuclear project was fighting through its own delays and cost problems: Plant Vogtle. And unlike VC Summer, Vogtle eventually crossed the line. Unit 3 entered commercial operation in 2023. Unit 4 followed in 2024. Together, the new units can serve roughly 1 million homes and businesses. The construction cranes had finally created something valuable, an operating asset. And the moment that happens, the entire financial story flips. Because now the machine starts selling electricity. Inside the reactor, nuclear fission produces heat. That heat ultimately creates steam. Steam spins a turbine. The turbine drives a generator and electricity enters the grid. From an engineering perspective, the system is extraordinary. From the owner's perspective, the idea is much simpler. Keep the plant operating. Sell the electricity because nuclear plants have enormous fixed costs. The plant exists whether it's producing electricity or not. Employees still need salaries. Security doesn't disappear. Maintenance continues. Regulatory requirements remain. So every hour the reactor is available to generate electricity matters. But how the owner gets paid depends on where the plant operates. Some plants operate within regulated utility systems. Others sell into electricity markets. Some have long-term arrangements. Some may receive additional support for providing capacity or clean electricity. That means two identical reactors could face very different economics simply because they exist in different markets. But once operating successfully, nuclear has something powerful on its side time. The construction period may have lasted years, but the operating life can last for decades. The new Vogtle units, for example, have been discussed in terms of potential operation over roughly 60 to 80 years. Imagine that a person who helped approve the project may retire decades before the reactor does. And this leads to one of nuclear power's strangest economic advantages. Sometimes the most valuable reactor isn't the newest one. It's the one somebody already paid to build. Look at a nuclear plant from far away and you see a few enormous buildings. Look at its balance sheet and you see something closer to a small industrial city. Operators, nuclear engineers, maintenance teams, security personnel, emergency planning, training in subsections, testing cybersecurity, replacement equipment, regulatory programs, and constant monitoring. The reactor may be the star of the show, but an entire human system keeps it alive. Then there is fuel. Most people assume uranium must be one of the biggest reasons nuclear electricity is expensive. But that's misleading. Raw uranium is only one part of the nuclear fuel cycle. Uranium has to be mined, inverted, enriched, fabricated into fuel, transported, used, and eventually managed after it leaves the reactor. And even then, fuel is only one piece of the plant's overall economics. An NRC-hosted economic analysis illustrated something surprising. When the assumed price of uranium doubled from $25 to $50 per pound, the modeled nuclear fuel cost did not double. It moved from roughly half a cent per kilowatt-hour to around 0.62 cents. That's because uranium itself is only one layer of the cost. So if uranium isn't necessarily the financial monster people imagine, what is for a new nuclear project? We already know one answer: construction and financing. But for an operating plant, another enemy appears: downtime. Nuclear reactors periodically shut down for refueling. And when that happens, something remarkable begins. The plant stops producing electricity. But instead of becoming quiet, it gets busy. Fuel assemblies are replaced. Equipment is inspected. Maintenance jobs are completed. Components are repaired. Thousands of planned tasks can be compressed into a carefully managed outage. For the owner, the clock matters, because while the reactor is offline, it isn't generating electricity. The goal is not simply to finish quickly. It's to finish safely, correctly, and predictably. A badly managed outage can last longer than expected, and every additional day can mean more lost generation. This reveals something fundamental about owning and operating nuclear plant. The business isn't just about producing electricity. It's about maintaining the ability to produce electricity reliably. But even perfect operations cannot eliminate every cost, because one of the plant's longest financial obligations begins with something incredibly small: the fuel. After spending years producing electricity, it has to go somewhere. A customer turns on a light, electricity arrives, the light turns off, transaction finished. But the nuclear fuel that helped produce that electricity doesn't disappear. Spent nuclear fuel remains radioactive and must be managed. Exactly who carries which responsibility depends on the country. Plant operators, utilities, governments, specialized waste organizations, different systems divide the burden differently. But economically, the idea is extraordinary. The product is consumed instantly. The responsibility connected to producing it can last far longer. And waste isn't the only future bill. One day, every reactor reaches the end of its operating life. Electricity production stops. Revenue from that reactor ends. But spending may continue. The plant has to be defueled. Radioactive materials managed, facilities decontaminated, structures dismantled or maintained through approved decommissioning strategies. and the site must eventually satisfy regulatory requirements. This is why decommissioning funding matters. Money may be set aside during the plant's operating years to help pay for work that won't happen until decades later. Think about what that means. A tiny part of the economics of electricity sold today may be connected to dismantling the machine tomorrow, or more accurately, many years from tomorrow. So nuclear ownership has three completely different financial lives: construction, operation, and retirement. But there's another risk hanging over all three. A nuclear accident doesn't respect the boundaries of a normal corporate balance sheet. Imagine a normal industrial accident. A company has insurance. There are damages. Claims are paid. Now imagine a severe nuclear accident. The consequences could potentially extend far beyond the plant itself. That creates a difficult question. How do you insure a risk whose worst-case consequences could overwhelm ordinary commercial insurance? Different countries have developed specialized nuclear liability systems. In the United States, the Price-Anderson framework combines primary insurance with an industry-wide retrospective assessment system. The details are complex, but the underlying idea is simple. Some risks are too large to treat like an ordinary factory accident. History has already shown why 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima, each changed the nuclear conversation in different ways, and the consequences did not remain inside the fences of a single power plant. Policy changed, regulations changed, public opinion changed, entire national energy strategies changed. This means a nuclear plant owner operates in a strange world. You can run your own plant successfully and still be affected economically by an accident thousands of miles away, because nuclear power isn't judged reactor by reactor. Public trust can move across borders, and so can political risk, which brings us to one of the biggest nuclear projects being built today, and one enormous number, £35 billion. Hinkley Point C is being built in Britain. 2 enormous nuclear reactors, a project designed to produce electricity for decades. But getting to that first unit of electricity has become an extraordinary financial journey. EDF's 2026 estimate puts the completion cost at around £35 billion in 215 sterling, and Unit 1's production start is currently targeted for 2030. This is nuclear economics in one project. Spend enormous amounts today, absorb years of construction risk, and hope the completed asset produces value for generations. The deeper problem is not simply that the project costs billions. Plenty of infrastructure costs billions. The problem is the combination: huge capital, long construction periods, complex engineering, strict regulation, and revenue that largely waits on the other side of completion. This is why the financial structure behind a nuclear project matters so much. Someone has to carry the risk while the plant is being built. Investors, utilities, customers, governments, sometimes a combination. And this leads to the biggest twist in the entire economics of nuclear ownership. If building a new nuclear plant is so financially difficult, maybe the most interesting nuclear asset isn't a new reactor at all. Maybe it's an old one. Imagine 2 nuclear plants. Plant A exists only on paper. It still needs licensing, financing, construction workers, years of development, and billions of dollars before it produces electricity. Plant B is already standing. The grid connection exists. The reactor exists. The turbine exists. The site exists. The operating organization exists. Its construction risk happened decades ago. That doesn't automatically make Plant B profitable. Old reactors still require maintenance, upgrades, regulatory approval, fuel and employees' security, and eventually decommissioning. But economically, the starting point is completely different. You aren't asking, can we successfully build this enormous machine? You're asking, can we keep this existing machine operating safely and economically? That difference helps explain why extending the lives of existing nuclear plants can be so strategically important, and why there is even interest in restarting certain reactors that have already shut down. The most valuable component of an existing nuclear plant may not be the reactor vessel, or the turbine, or the generator. It may simply be this: someone already survived the construction bill.